And let's move to the second speaker, Tirna Chatterjee. Tirna is PhD student at Jawaharlal Nehru University in India, and the title of her presentation is Beckett in Bengal: Boredom, Waiting, Repetition in the Cinema of Ashish Avikunthak. So, Tirna, your turn.
Thank you so much. Your pronunciation was so on point. I
Try
must
my best.
I must warn you guys, okay, this is going to be a truly boring experience because I'm going to read it because there's so much that I wanted to say and I'm going to time myself and I'm just please accept my apologies. I think Boredom Studies gets a bad rap for not acknowledging the post-colonial, but it just whatever the discipline is becoming, there is a lot of scope and a lot of innate realizations within it. That's why Beckett, because of his sort of semi-colonized history or whatever, and because he has traveled so much, his work has traveled so much, and this film you guys will see. I'm just working on one film because I couldn't get access to the other film that I mentioned in my abstract, but I hope that is fine. So just got some clips from the film so that there's some context. Not even clips, just screen grabs from the films that I'll just keep running as the PowerPoint, and then I'm just gonna read it. Apologies, you're going to be very bored. Sorry about that. Wait. Okay. So Beckett in Bengal, boredom, waiting, and repetition in the cinema of Ashish Avikunthak to the example of Kalkimanthankatha. In the realm of intercultural exchange and artistic adaptation, Beckett's Waiting for Godot possesses a remarkable capacity for transgeographical, translinguistic, and transcultural resonance. The vague, minimal setting, an old country road, and an almost barren tree. The play's entrenched premise, two men wandering in a wasteland awaiting the arrival of a third character, and a distinct yet amorphous dialogue. Avikuntrak's 79-minute adaptation represents an intriguing transformation of Beckett's post-war tragic comic theatre of absurd into a post-colonial meditation on future, the experience of waiting for the future or the Messiah, and the boredom inherent to that waiting. Avikuntak achieves this by fusing ancient Indian philosophical and religious treatises of akarma, inaction, anitya, impermanence, anivarchanya, indeterminableness, and sunyata, emptiness, with the text of the play and Beckett's larger philosophical, political, and oft ignored theological oeuvre. The Beckettian stage doesn't forbid anything as its fundamental ideal is to disintegrate the boundaries of discourse. Hence, the tramps navigate a spectrum of emotions, realizations, and inquiries while parlaying through spiteful jibes, expressions of care, almost conjugal intimacy, and eccentric farces, while a constant meaning deficit takes on a deliberate nature, even going as far as to recommend suicide as a way to pass or kill the time. Hemmed within an existence bereft of profundity and meaningfulness, and lodged within the sphere of only existence instead of an enclosing world, there is an underlining of abject futility. Kalki, the 10th and final incarnation of Vishnu, is believed to herald the end of the current Yuga cycle, Kali Yuga, and initiate the resurgence of the next, Satya Yuga, marking the conclusion of one time cycle and the beginning of the next, which is very unlike the linear eschatological thought of Abrahamic religions. Avikuntak combines the cyclical expectation associated with Kalki's divine eventuality with the fortitude of waiting for Godot. The profundity of what Hoffman calls Beckett's epistemological inquiries, wherein the future is repetitious, eventual, and fundamentally not final, is resurfaced in this adaptation and is contextualized against questions about violence, sexuality, caste, race, perversion, rape, communal and sexual violence, revolution, and love. The condition of waiting and the intrinsic boredom associated with it are further given a politicized treatment through the juxtaposition of another transgeographic and translinguistic reference by layering the film with the historic event of the Naxalite Revolution, an armed rebellion that was led by peasants and students in India in the late 60s and early 70s, adapting Beckett, narrating by way of non narration. Beckett's text had from its earliest days struck a chord with the Bengali as well as the Indian culture, capturing the attention of numerous playwrights from as early as the late 50s Batul Sarkar and to later and even eventually in the 90s and 80s by Nasiruddin Shah and Deepak Majumdar, which yielded many translations, productions, and adaptations. The ambiguity of the text facilitates experimental reimaginings without forcing the audience with specific context. Constant decontextualization, as Taylor and Batty points out, is identifiably an effective quality of the play. Through this cinematic adaptation, the resonance is intensified, revealing an expansive scope of formalistic possibilities. Not only does the director translate Beckett's narrative into a distinguished cultural atmosphere, but also infuses it with layers of meaning drawn from within the postcolonial experience as well as from a theological prehistory. In being deliberately resistant to traditional norms and designs of Western literature, a vital component of Beckett's work splices effortlessly through the postcolonial, for it also echoes a fractured spiritus mondi. Avikunthak unearths in Beckett a text that is acutely global and similarly local in its nature, as almost an ideal form which can be seamlessly morphed to form the base of a specifically Hindu context. Um, Amidst contemplations of ethical quandaries and aesthetic complexities, be it abstraction, misinterpretation, and untranslatability, a subtle disclosure comes to the fore. The specific act of adaptation authenticates the sway of some ideologies over others. At the same time, it exudes quiet similarities which dwell within the interstices of differences. The vacuum portrayed in Beckett's play, Resonating Heidegger, is not a novel notion, but one that is deeply rooted in theological traditions. The theological transfer from Beckett to Avikuntak occurs through the prism of boredom, with waiting as the main character of the play. With respect to the formulation of the characters' beings as waiting, there is a next to no opportunity for any authentic individuality and is instead marked by a complete indolence, embroiled in a barren life that still bears boredom as a Tolstoyesque desire for a desire. There is thus a life negating kind of brutality, reminiscent of that which is often found in Western eschatology, which is central to the larger Beckettian aesthetic text. This does indeed breed a kind of universalism. Regardless of the recursively benumbed and vacuous essence of their lives, the characters nevertheless retain a logic of purpose, despite how illusory or abstract it may be. There is a transpiration within their existence only through the certitude that there is something that is being waited for, an incarnation, a promise, a future, an arrival. This underlines the fact that there is a resoluteness with respect to the questions of meaning and meaningfulness as fundamental, even within the scope of apparently meaningless circumstances. Moreover, it is within the creation of such an implicit feeling, experience, and understanding of boredom in waiting that echoes across the specific adaptation in terms of both content and form. The boredom that is centered in this here may stem as much from that which is interesting, felicitous, and distracting as the boring itself. The wait for the future, the end, the redemption, and the resurgence intensifies the emptiness of boredom. Even the spiritual political weight that the text alludes to does not relieve boredom, but instead it populates the present as a device. This manifests acutely in the realm of the text and this adaptation. I think I've made that point. The boring design of the film demands a demonstrative and a contemplative attentiveness to the visual regime, being unraveled to the audience. A certain kind of boringness is demanded as a meditative, restorative, and contemplative anchor. Where Beckett interspersed the central banality with uproariously absurd humor, Aviguntak chooses to pair it through deliberate cinematic techniques, from the still long shots of expansive landscapes to the shifting soundscapes which accompany it. from the jolt like reappearance of the tramps into the open landscapes to the dead space and dead time which mark each frame. From a gradual yet sudden shift in the screen from grainy, pockmarked grey to a vivid blue with the singing body of a sari clad woman seated under a giant tree with a tambora. The song that she sings stays on screen for a whole 5 minutes in stilled frame, and then it jolts back to its grey texture. One tramp walks slowly from the distant arid hillocks, while the other stares into the distance as the song quietens and is replaced by unintelligible announcements. The moment of sublimity illustrates how all acts and attempts to resolve boredom is at its core fundamentally the boring, which also protracts and amplifies it. The fatal lassitude of boredom encloses actuality in a deep gloom, an encounter with the emptiness that colonizes everything, every space, and every time. This is my last section, okay? The boredom of waiting or the boring wait. In his essay, The Phenomenological Analysis of Waiting, Imad Shauri highlighted that the experience of waiting encompasses both the individual and the collective realm of consciousness. He shows that the individual level waiting is subjectively encountered, while at the collective it takes on a projected state, manifesting in social, political, theological, and historical dimensions. Chowdhury suggests that on a collective level, individual consciousness becomes objectified and merges with the broader collective state, creating a shared encounter with waiting. This state of waiting lacks a sense of presence since consciousness is propelled forward, surpassing its current undertaking and fixating on the potentialities of what is yet to come rather than its present existence. Consequently, waiting engenders a sense of self estrangement, specifically a detachment from one's temporal possibilities, and this experience of empty time during waiting bears the potential to obviously trigger our best friend boredom. To Barbalet, boredom encompasses more than the mere passage of time, but involves a complete loss of meaning that individuals experience, which can profoundly affect their sense of self, a deprivation of meaning that leads to disengagement. Jacques Ellul sees boredom as gloomy, dull, and joyless, or one of the defining perversions of life, while Karl Barth saw it as the distinctive characteristic of contemporary humanity where neither serenity nor rebellion, but simply an utter weariness and boredom takes over. So, not only is man bored with himself and burdened by everything, but boredom can lead one to assume that all life is thus empty. The all encompassing act of waiting takes place within the realm of what is known yet unknown, what is known as unknown, where anticipation and uncertainty encounter each other across the grey shots of the bare landscapes of Western India and the blurry convalesque of the gatherings in the background, reverberating through the loud and the distant cacophony of the crowd. Waiting. Implies the act of holding space for something's arrival. Kalki as the triumphs of Avikunthak's rendition, or Godot as Vladimir and Astrogon call out. It is a device, a posturing, an approach where one finds themselves stationed voluntarily or ambivalently, yet bearing with it the effect that it has on the embroilment of the future. It is a preoccupation with the future in perpetual generation, a boring repetition of inevitabilities which can potentially devour essence. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much, Tirna.
Thank you.
Despite
I'm so sorry. I'm then
the small technical
guys the
inconvenience,
film.
sorry,
And
go ahead,
then
please.
maybe I can send you guys the film later with the access code. I think it'll make a little more sense if I can do that. Whoever wants to see it, it's just a 79-minute film. So I can just link the film and the password to watch it here. So whoever wants to watch it later, they can go ahead.
No, absolutely. That'll be great and super interesting. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you very much, Tirna. So time is open now. We have 10 minutes for discussion. So any comments, questions, observations? Okay. Maybe I will start, Tirna. Yeah, I think I may have missed many points regarding the particularity of the films or of the works that I unfortunately don't know. But I was very interested in two things you said, and I wonder if you could elaborate more on that. The first one, you said in a moment that boringness is demanded. I mean, my two questions are about, so to speak, the political dimension of boredom. Is boredom could be a space to change, to transformation? Is boredom in art can have a, yeah, a potential of transformation in a way, of political
Yeah.
transformation? So the first one, you were saying that boringness is demanded, and I would like you to elaborate a little bit more on that. And then you made a point very interesting. Then actually our colleague here, Jose Farros, insist on that many times. You say that boredom is a loss of meaning, consists in a loss of meaning, and this loss of meaning brings a certain, you say, disengagement, as if this loss of meaning could bring a certain depoliticization, a certain loss of the interest in participate in public sphere, so to speak. So yeah, I was wondering what do you think about that, and if boredom actually help us to politicize our lives, or on the opposite is a source of disengagement, apathy, and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting in a way that when I was talking about waiting on like those two levels of collective and individual, boredom on a collective level in itself, where a certain kind of political agency can emerge as a sort of communitarian effect or whatever. Though I'm sure there are like expressions of resistance in terms of that, but it becomes boredom in itself becomes such an individual experience of one's loss of meaning that there is always that threat of it being depoliticized by its very virtue. You don't even have to proactively depoliticize it, but the fact that waiting for a revolution or waiting for change or waiting for something to happen, there is a kind of a abject meaningfulness that you pitch to the act of waiting. But the moment it doesn't arrive, or that non-arrival becomes the very goal of the whole text, then it just immensely becomes this depoliticized experience of life. I actually really hold on to this one meaning that Customans and had written in their paper on modernity, war, and boredom, where they say that boredom is the realization of futile agency, where you know that you have agency, but your agency is in itself has a certain kind of futility to it. What do you do with that agency? And I think that in a way that what I was trying to like say is that in terms of formulations or genealogical formulations of where boredom is in Western theory or Western philosophy, of course, there's a lot of borrowing that goes on when we do academic writing. But the post-colonial body, there is this deep interest in ourself, because there is this demand for, say, reformulation or for reparations or for a certain kind of an act to happen. So we are kind of waiting in a way, waiting for, say, independence, or we are waiting for someone to apologize or whatever. There is a deep kind of that modernity, is that interest in yourself, where you have that like you're that in that moment of history where you have an intentional interest in your own history or your own prehistory. And the similarities in eschatological thought is so interesting and so deep that even though in Abrahamic eschatology it is a point to another, it is linear, and in Hindu eschatology it is circular, because there's a guarantee that this terrible age will come and end, apocalypse will ruin everything, but then the resurgence of the age of the gods will start. So there is no promise of an end. So you're basically waiting to wait. So the whole existence in itself is supposed to be one of ultimate and complete boredom. Even if you did have agency, what are you going to do? The world will be over. Kali Yuga is going to take everything, and what's going to come is Satya Yuga, and it's going to take its shape again. So effectively depoliticized in itself. So
Mm.
unless there is like Yasmin Moshabash's work points to that a lot, that how indigenous realizations of boredom have like a more proactive role to play, because the meaning of time is extremely different. But when we are so effectively democratized, everything is completely flatlined. I don't know that there is that possibility of sort of getting, I mean, I guess dying. I guess when we are dead. I'm
Yes, yes,
sorry,
yes.
I don't think I answered any of the questions, but I did
Oh,
want.
that's a very good reflection. That's fine. That's fine. So we have another question by Marius.
I
Yes, you mentioned postcolonial studies and that boredom studies are not particularly interested in postcolonial studies. So, what could be the relationship between boredom studies and postcolonial studies, according to you?
I don't think boredom studies is not interested. It's just that it hasn't happened as of yet, because when I started my PhD, there was nothing from South Asia at all. Like there was a lot of material. Like I mean, I cannot do any kind of research on boredom without Heidegger, but I was searching very deeply for something that the genealogy is not from the West. It is not boredom studies' fault. I mean, it's an open discipline. It's not institutionalized itself. There is so much scope to work with it, because our prehistories are so entirely similar that the empire becomes this intricate figure in that, which brings with it some the whole introduction of bureaucracy per se. Like that's the empire's gift to the rest of the world, and it is one of the most boring projects in the world. So overall, I think that there are a lot of intersections and potentialities where the post-colonial and the boredom study scholar can meet. And banality and boredom is so the experience of everybody's life. I think if everybody in the world could be united over one thing, it's boredom. Like literally nobody else would agree on anything except for the fact that they get bored sometimes. I genuinely do believe that.
Okay. Um, we still have time for one quick question. One more. No, we're all good. Okay. In any case, Tirna, we're looking forward that you
Yeah,
send
I will
us
send the film. Yeah.
the film. Oh, Josef is saying that Andres and I myself are putting together a collective volume that will include chapters on boredom, a thrust from non-typical Western approaches. It will be published with Rowley's the next year. So there's an answer as well to Mari's question about the relation between postcolonial studies and boredom studies. Thank you very much, Josefa. And above all, thank you very much, Tirna, for your stimulating talk. We very much look forward this